morning, everybody. Happy Monday and welcome into FreightWaves Now. I'm Kaylee Nixon here with Anthony Smith, ready to kick off the last Monday FreightWaves Now of the year.
That's right, and we're starting it off with a big one coming up. We'll have Baudendistel, and we'll talk about the latest in the CPG world. Also, we'll get to hear from Ryder and their latest announcement. But first, our top story takes us to the autonomous trucking scene as Adler joins us to talk about a big announcement from Embark Trucks. Alan, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning, guys. Nice to be here. We have real news today. Sifting through announcents from autonomous trucking companies really requires a little bit of understanding of what's going on behind the scenes. This morning, Knight-Swift is taking the first delivery of an autonomous equipped truck from Embark Trucks. Now, what does that really mean? It means basically that the software that Embark has been using in test trucks and things like that is now installed. It's a Kenworth T680 that Knight-Swift owns and will operate under its own authority. This is a big deal for a couple reasons. One, until now, all of the autonomous trucks that have been on the road basically have belonged to the developer. They've been prototypes essentially. Now you're getting away from that and you're getting into a truck that will be driven by Knight-Swift drivers, and they will be essentially the safety drivers that have been in the trucks all along. So we're still not to the point of driver out. That's a few years out, a couple years in the case of Embark's estimate. But we are looking at a significant move now to get trucks into the fleets of the customers.
I love this announcement coming out from Embark because it feels like they've been kind of moving behind the scenes for a while, right? We've seen some big names kind of take the forefront of the headlines recently in the autonomous space. In Embark, they had a really good run, some good announcements over earlier in the summer, and this has kind of been like their fall of work, right? And now they're coming out with this partnership with Knight-Swift. Is that kind of the general theme that you got from them as well?
Well, what's really fascinating, Kaylee, is I went back and I looked at the third quarter earnings transcript, which I really hadn't spent any time on. Alex Rodriguez, the CEO of the company, spent a great deal of time walking through what was going to happen with Knight-Swift. The only thing he didn't say was what the date would be. But basically, they helped pick the truck that was equipped with their software. Remember, there's two different ways that autonomous truck companies work. One is to work as a Torque Robotics or a Waymo, and more recently, or at least till recently, Too Simple, to basically get a chassis that's purpose-built for this. Embark's approach, as well as Kodiak Robotics, is to sell the software that can essentially, I don't like plug and play, but can be integrated into a truck. And that's exactly what's happening here. So they really laid all of this out back in November. I guess if you didn't hear the tree fall in the forest, you didn't know about it. But we did report back in February that they were working on this with Knight-Swift.
And Alan, when you look at Embark Trucks and Knight-Swift, what are the terms of this relationship right now?
Well, Knight-Swift, Anthony, is part of the partnership development program at Embark. Embark has got about 14,200. These are non-binding reservations for its software from these companies that essentially have joined their partnership program. They haven't said a lot about those. There's no revenue associated with this particular move right now. Early next year, you'll see single-digit numbers of trucks in the Knight fleet that'll be running. Probably they're starting out with a Los Angeles to Phoenix route, which Embark has been doing for quite some time. The truck will start out at a Knight facility and then it'll go to Phoenix and back. There's a lot to this, and I understand that we have Sam Abidi from Embark coming in to tell us.
Yes, so let's go ahead and welcome Sam on in. Sam, thank you for being here to chit-chat with Alan about this. I'll let you guys get to chatting, but once again, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Hey, good morning, Sam. I know it's a little early out there. Thanks for getting up. We appreciate that. Wanted to give. I'm sorry.
I was saying thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, glad to have you here. Well, you're kind of a regular on our shows anyway. So, but Sam, I want you to sort of explain from your perspective the one or two biggest parts of this handoff now to Knight-Swift.
Yeah, absolutely. So this kind of, as you said a few moments ago, kind of transitions us from the AV developer owning and coddling the AV system to it actually needing to meet the normal operation standards of a large carrier. And all the operational activities that have to happen to make that possible, getting pre-inspection standardized so that a night driver can do them, getting maintenance procedures in a fashion that Knight's comfortable integrating them with their existing maintenance. All those things had to be worked through here. And that takes a lot of planning. You all were mentioning a lot of work in the background. That's exactly what the last year has been. It's been a lot of work in the background, getting the truck ready for their operations and getting their operations ready for the truck. And those are learnings you only really get when you commit to doing something like this. So I'd say that that's probably been the one biggest takeaway learning benefit from executing this program, is getting our trucks prepared to be able to actually be given over to carriers.
Sam, you've done a lot of work on that Los Angeles to Phoenix route. You've got transfer hubs and things like that. How much of this carries over to Knight Swift now in terms of, well, they'll use their own facility, is that correct? And then basically do the drop and hook there and out to the highway?
Yes, that's accurate. So we actually we're kind of domiciling the trucks at Knight Swift's Phoenix facility. And so we've done a lot of work with them to prepare that facility to be able to accept and deploy autonomous trucks. Everything from what power is available to what Wi-Fi is available so that we can transmit our data at the end of the runs. And yes, they'll essentially drop and hook at those facilities. The truck will drive under human power to the highway, and then once on the highway, it'll drive in autonomous mode.
Right. Knight Swift, why? They're number 3. They've got 20, I'm not going to get this number right, 2,800 trucks, I think, in their fleet. The tractors, I should say. Why them? They're number 3. They're a big player. Is that the answer?
Yeah, no, I think there's a little bit more to it. I think there's another zero there. They're 20,000 plus trucks. So it's really two things. It's scale and operational excellence. So if you look at Knight Swift, they have one of the best operating ratios in the industry. That comes straight out of exceptional day-to-day ops. If we're going to go through a years-long effort to prepare our operating model around the truck, we'd want to do it with a company that has that down pat. And Knight Swift is exactly that. The procedures that they have get run thousands of times a day. And so you know that they're efficient. And so when we're able to bring our version, they're able to essentially modify it in a way that brings us closer to having an extremely efficient operating model. And then you couple that with the fact that if you get this working inside of Knight, you've gotten it working inside of a network that already has 20,000 trucks out on the road daily. And so between the operational excellence and the scale, those are two reasons to really pick someone like Knight Swift for an operation like this.
Now, I think you indicated to me when we talked the other day that you'll be single-digit numbers of trucks in the Knight system next year, basically. But you're still talking about getting the driver out of the truck entirely by 2024.
Yeah, that is still. Yes. So the way to think about this is we're really stepping the path of what some of the EV truck developers did. So if you look at them about a year or 2 years ago, the things that they were doing was they were handing large professional fleets a very small number of trucks so that those fleets could actually begin running them day to day, providing feedback and having everything from the product itself to the operations that surrounded it modified so that those fleets could get ready for larger deployments of those electric trucks. Autonomy is going to follow a very similar playbook. And we're in that first inning here. One of the first big steps is handing over a couple of units to the AV to the carrier so that they can start providing us feedback. And we're actually in that process right now of starting to get some of that initial feedback from the Knight Swift leadership and management teams so that we can understand what needs to actually change about the product, what needs to change about the procedures that we've built around it. And once you have those down into a playbook, it really paves the road for you to begin to scale your count over time as we mature into our full product.
Last question for this morning from me anyway is this, and that goes to how much monitoring are you doing, that is Embark doing, of the Knight Swift truck as it's out there? You have some kind of system, I think, that tracks that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is, I'd say, a critical piece of this entire program. We have a system called Embark Guardian, And Guardian you can think of as essentially a remote monitoring system. So you imagine that when one of these trucks is out on the road, there is someone in a center. They're watching the vehicle essentially drive from point A to point B. They're monitoring the system health. They're checking in that the system is good to be dispatched, that it was brought up correctly, etc. And the way to think about it is this is a second line of defense after the Night Swift dispatchers and the drivers who are doing the pre-inspection. And so these two kind of work harmoniously together. The Night Swift driver will pre-inspect the vehicle, they'll approve it for dispatch, and then an Embark Guardian staff will also run that process remotely. And then once both parties have checked off, that vehicle can actually set off on its run that day. And while it's out there on the road, the Guardian staff will monitor it and ensure that the system health remains in top shape as the vehicle moves between Los Angeles and Phoenix.
But just to be clear, there's no teleoperations here, right? I mean, it's simply a monitoring?
Yes, it's simply monitoring and system health in this instance.
Okay, great. I'm going to turn it back to Kaylee and Anthony. Guys, if we have any time left, shoot.
Alan, I just want to kind of get your thoughts on now. I mean, I ask you about the rat race of autonomy all the time, right? Like who's in front, who's getting there. But this now seems like it is pushing Embark ahead. Is that kind of the case in your thoughts as well?
I think on one level, yes. I think it definitely does that. I don't know that, overall you've got to look at the things, I think, Sam, you still have 3 things left on your list of imperatives to get done. One of the competitors has already done tire blowout. You're kind of waiting on that. You've done some things that others haven't done. So, I mean, I know, Sam, you would probably say you're in the lead. You certainly were the first, Embark was the first, Kaylee, to do autonomous driving back in 2018, and they ran, I think, something for Frigidaire. So Sam, correct me here if I'm wrong. Frigidaire from out in El Paso over to Los Angeles, I think. And so they've been very quietly operating some of these things. And you're right, there was a lot of news earlier in the year. Then it got a little quiet for a while, and I think we end the year much like we did last year when Too Simple did the driver out pilot at the end of the year. You've got this handoff, which I would kind of put right up there in the same kind of area.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much both for joining us this morning to chat about this. Awesome to have Sam on as well. Alan, we will talk to you later on this week, I'm sure.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Right now, we're going to head over to the wall for our first carrier update of the morning.
Welcome into this first carrier update of the week. I'm Tony Mulvey, joined by Donny Gilbert. Donny, going to start by looking at what's going on in the diesel market. Obviously seeing a decline still on the retail side.
Yeah, so that's a good sign. First of all, we are still seeing declines in the retail. We're only down to 486. But of course, that's a lot better than nearly 550 a gallon. Mm-hmm. Now, late last week, we saw the wholesale prices, the rack prices start to go up. And getting nervous about that. Is it's going to slow or stop the decline in diesel fuel? Well, it's turned back around over the weekend and started to come back down a little bit.
Yeah.
So that's a positive sign as well. As long as this can continue to fall and we keep that spread in the gap to a reasonable rate, we'll see this continue to fall.
Yep, absolutely. It's all about that comfortability of these retail location owners, right?
Yes.
They want to be in that $1 to $1.10. This year, it seems like they want to be in that $1.20 to $1.25. Just given the volatility of the diesel market as a whole, it kind of insulates them a little more than maybe what in previous times would be.
Yeah. So if we go to the next chart here and look, we'll see that we're right here at $1.80. Mm-hmm. It was going down. Of course, it came back up as the rack prices increased, and then it's kind of leveled off here. We're at $1.80. So we're still in that range where there is plenty of room. And I told you last week I saw where some of the stations near my house had dropped their prices $1 a gallon. Mm-hmm. Well, when this went back up a little bit, they went up a little bit. So the gentleman that was running that station, he's back to being legitimate. Yep. So he dropped to the $3.99. He upped it 19 cents, and he's at $4.19 now. And then I'm sure he'll, once this drops down a little bit further, he will drop his price again. And he's forced other stations around now to start dropping their prices. So I'm hearing prices in Chattanooga that are getting down to that $3.74, $3.99, $4.19 range. Mm-hmm. But there's still some that are near the interstate that are $4.74 and $4.99.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that are price gouging.
Yeah, absolutely. I drove to Nashville this weekend and could see, it was interesting to see how the prices along the interstate at the truck stops were changing just from Friday to Sunday. I mean, you saw
now I do apologize. I was not looking at truck stops. I'm just looking at regular fuel stations. There are no truck stops near my house. They're either up in Chattanooga or further down to Ringo, but that's the only thing that I can really use on my daily drives. But again, you'll see the same thing like you said. It's interesting to watch and see how these guys are changing their prices, looking up and down the interstate going, well, if they're not going to drop theirs, I'm not going to drop mine.
Absolutely.
That's been a big problem. All right, one more slide here real quick. Coming up here, Kaylee's going to look at some weather. This is just a preview here. We've got some cold air coming in. It's going to cause some problems. Once she discusses it, we'll come back to this map and tell you what we think needs to happen.
Absolutely. Well, Donny, thank you so much for this update. We'll be sure to check in with you again a little later. Right now, we'll toss it over to Sydney Edwards.
With a first look at our headlines for the day, I'm Sydney Edwards. Now, production and exports of heavy-duty trucks from Mexico skyrocketed in November, which is a sure sign that supply chain issues are stabilizing. During the month, 14 truck makers that are part of a national association of truck and bus producers manufactured 17,491 vehicles, a 47.3% increase year over year. Exports also increased 47% year over year to 14,235 units. Truck makers in Mexico include Freightliner, Kenworth, Navistar, Mercedes-Benz, and Cummins. Company leaders at UPS are already throwing around plans for what may happen if the Teamsters Union decides to strike if a contract is not put in place next year. The current contract expires on August 1st of next year, which will affect 38,000 workers. Experts say organized labor currently has more leverage in Congress and with the public court of opinion, so that threat of a strike should not be taken lightly. UPS is preparing to tell its managers to not schedule any paid time off in July and August in case a strike happens. That move shows that the company plans on continuing operations even if an agreement is not reached. And trailer manufacturers are pulling in strong new orders to meet pent-up and replacement demand, even with the signs of a slowing economy. Preliminary orders for dry and refrigerated vans and flatbeds totaled 39,000 units in November, according to ACT Research, which was a 22% increase year over year. However, that number was down 17% from October, which saw a huge intake of 48,000 orders. Large for-hire and private fleets are driving demand, according to manufacturer Great Dane. Once final November results are available, the industry-wide trailer backup should increase by around 13,500 units. Now, for details on those headlines and even more information, you can log on to FreightWaves.com. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, don't forget to like and subscribe. For the full FreightWaves TV experience, you can get our FreightWaves app or log on to tv.freightwaves.com. We'll have more FreightWaves Now after this break.
The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
Hold on a second, Tony. See that? No scrapes, no scuffs, no damage. Thank you. Because we make sure each pallet is touched as few times as possible and that is handled with care, no matter where it's going. That's the precision you get from a nationwide LTL freight company with over 35 years of industry-leading experience, an entire team that's driven to deliver on time and damage-free.
XPO, your freight, first.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. It's time for our first check of the weather here on this Monday morning. We are looking at a very cold week on the way for pretty much all of the United States. Starting off with mostly the northern Great Plains and the Rockies, and then a very powerful cold front will dip to the south, eventually getting all of us down into the below freezing mark by the time that the week is over. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events. Right now we've got up our maximum forecast highs for the next 24 hours, and you can already start to see where that cold air is starting to work its way in. So these are the high temperatures, yes, and everything from basically Nebraska, Iowa, Wisconsin up to the northwest will be sitting below freezing for your highs starting today. And that cold air will slowly start to make its way down to the southeast, eventually turning into a pretty potent winter storm thanks to the cold air already being in place before the moisture arrives. So with that, folks from Montana up to North Dakota going to be seeing daytime highs sitting in the negative 10s. So we're talking like negative 10 to negative 14 in some of these places. Wind chill is going to be down into the negative 20s, possibly some negative 30s. So because of that, we do have wind chill warnings in place across North Dakota, into South Dakota, and then up into eastern Montana as well. Farther down to the southeast, of course, we get a little bit warmer, but still wouldn't call this warm as we're sitting right at or below zero in some places across central South Dakota and then into Wyoming. Wind chill watches in place for South Dakota and Wyoming. And then as you get further down to the southeast, obviously we get a little bit warmer, but we already have preemptive winter storm watches in place as we prepare for this next bout of winter weather, which should start to materialize by Wednesday on into Thursday of this week. What we are going to be watching, though, is some pretty hectic travel once again, especially right around that Christmas Eve holiday, specifically Thursday on in through Saturday of this week and the weekend. And we'll talk a little bit more about that coming up later on in the show. Right now, we're going to hand things over to Isaiah Buchanan. He's got our first check of what is trending on social media this morning.
Welcome into Social Roundabout, everyone. I'm Isaiah Buchanan, and we're less than a week away from Christmas now, but it seems that Santa has already started making some of his rounds around the U.S. Take a look at this video of Santa showing off some of his Christmas moves to some workers. Seems my counterpart, Christian Thomas, enjoyed that video. I could hear him laughing back in the back. Switching things up a little bit, Elon Musk, Twitter CEO, has put out a poll yesterday that shows asking Twitter if he should step down. It says, should I step down as head of Twitter? I will abide by the results of this poll. And so far, there have been over 17 million people that have voted in this poll, and 57% of them are saying that he should step down. Now, whether or not he actually follows that and goes along with what he says, I highly doubt it, but we'll continue to watch that poll and see what happens after the 24-hour time limit is up for that. Now, one last thing I want to talk about. Argentina won the World Cup yesterday. They beat France in penalty kicks. And this penalty kick right here was the kick that sealed the deal for Argentina. It was an incredible game to watch. Messi and Mbappe going head-to-head. I mean, just an incredible game. It went into extra time. It was tied at 3-3 after extra time. They go to penalty kicks, and Argentina just had enough stuff to pull it out in the end. France just could not get the ball to go in the back of the net during those penalty kicks. So shout out to Argentina and Messi, the GOAT of soccer, for winning the World Cup. That's all I have for this edition of the Social Roundabout. But right now, I'm going to toss things over to Kaylee and Anthony.
That's okay.
When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have customer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
It's a good day coming.
So, you need to reroute a large shipment from LA to Boston. With XPO, you can make it happen with one call to right here, an XPO team with local connections that will help find a solution. We've spent over 35 years perfecting LTL freight operations to make it easy for our customers to do business with us. Why? Because we're driven to be the best.
XPO, your freight first.
What does this have to do with freight? Well, I'm glad you asked. People are wondering what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be hyperinflation? When is hyperinflation going to be here? When is there going to be inflation? What's going to happen with inflation? Inflation, inflation, inflation.
This is the sexiest topic within the economy right now.
Welcome into this carrier update. Donny, you left off talking about it, colder weather. Well, and Kaylee mentioned it in the weather update, colder weather across the country.
It's coming in, and this is going to be real dangerous. This is going to cause a lot of problems with a lot of trucks, especially if you haven't done your maintenance. It's also going to push up volumes in this area for reefer products. Well, I'm sorry, for protect from freeze.
Yep.
They shouldn't be reefer products. But when these goods are being shipped right now because of the weather coming in, you may need to put these on a reefer. So if you're a carrier right now and you're picking up anything Kansas, Colorado, or north right now, you need to check your paperwork and see if it says protect from freeze.
Yeah.
And there's things like that you wouldn't think of, paint, any type of liquids, whether it's, I'm talking, not necessarily water, but any type of liquids could freeze and break the containers really. So bottles of water, yes, could break the containers. And you might need to put them on the reefer in this northern part of the country for right now and really all through next week. We're going to have we're going to have highs in Montana in some areas that are still in the negatives. So it's going to be a big deal. You're going to have tractors breaking. You're going to have, if it could be snowing, it could clog up the air filters from the snow. You're going to have trucks break down. You're going to have guys shut their trucks off not thinking about the cold weather that night, and they're not going to be able to recrank them in the morning. You're going to have metal pieces on these trucks break, Tony, because this cold weather is going to be so bitter cold it makes your steel very brittle. So you're going to see a lot of problems in this area. So because of that, you're going to see a lot of people avoid this area, which could push rejection rates up, which could push more loads to the spot market, which could allow people that are taking advantage of the spot market to push their rates up, loads going in and out of this area.
Absolutely. And we can tend to see what's going on to start there here when we move to the next chart.
Yep. So go to the next chart here. We're looking at reefer here. So right now, reefer volume's holding steady, maybe up just a hair over the past few days. Rejection rates, we saw rejection rates start to climb back, Tony, but they've already started to tip back down.
Yeah, we're talking at 5.5% too. So, it's really, them moving up that little bit isn't a big change at all.
We were hoping that it would continue, and it might bounce back. This was over the weekend, so continue to watch it. We are headed into Christmas here, so there is some potential they could reverse this trend and push it back up a little bit, but everybody's got to get together. And right now, people are trying really, they're probably trying to get home. And they're just taking what they can, and they're not really pushing those rates up. Next chart here. the changes in reefer, you see a lot of red because rates are going back down. You see blue, of course, in this area. Expect a lot of blues in this area and rejection rates to go up. And this is your opportunity right through here to really make some big money on the spot market with reefer.
Absolutely. Well, Donny, thank you so much for this update. We'll be sure to check in with you again a little later. Right now, I'll toss it over to Kaylee and Anthony.
All right, guys, thank you for that. We're going to go ahead and welcome in our editorial director, Rachel Premack, and Anthony. We're talking about your favorite topic today.
Is that inflation,
Faux
inflation, inflation?
Faux try.
Faux try?
No, inflation, inflation, inflation. We've got Rachel Premack joining us to talk a little bit about why just everything costs so much more. And I definitely felt it Christmas shopping this weekend. I don't know if you feel the same, Rachel.
Yeah, definitely things are costing a lot more than they used to, especially food. But on the other hand, there are all these weird products that are like super discounted. I keep referring to air fryers in everything I write as the thing that's like absurdly discounted right now. And I think what happened is that, consumers were buying a lot of these like kitchen appliances and home appliances in 2021, and retailers kept making more and more, but you only need one air fryer, you only need one exercise bike. So everyone who wants those things now has it, but they kept making them, they kept ordering them. So now we've got way too many of those. But then, the actual necessities of things we need, food, oil, heating oil, those things are all incredibly expensive right now.
And Rachel, I can only imagine this puts a really bad impact on both companies and consumers. So you see the consumers now having to pay more for those essentials, and a lot of the companies that are putting out some of these products like the air fryers, exercise bikes, things like that, are now losing margin and ultimately potentially going to be able to hire less people. Do we see this kind of coming to a head in the employment market at all?
Not that I've seen in the employment market yet, but that's definitely true that there are definitely certain types of retailers that are getting especially impacted by this. So it's interesting if you look at Walmart, for example, because they're such a big grocery retailer. They've been able to really work off some of their inventory issues. They've been able to get through some of that backlog a little bit more easily. But when you look at Bed Bath & Beyond or Williams-Sonoma, those are some examples of retailers that are struggling more because they are really selling those large or small kitchen and home appliances. So you can kind of generalize across all big box, or you can't really generalize it across all big box retail because some are more exposed to grocery and non-durable goods and some only do durable goods. So you definitely have to break it down in this whole retail sector.
I think as we sit here the week before Christmas, like everybody knows consumers are spending a lot on their credit cards. They're building up that consumer debt, but consumers still be consuming. Like I was out there at the mall this last weekend and it was awful, but people are still spending money, and maybe they're deal hunting, maybe they're not deal hunting, maybe they're going to spend less on Christmas goods than they did last year. But overall, when we round out kind of fourth quarter retail sales and kind of find those results as we start 2023, what do you think are going to be some of those like biggest trends to watch out for in the way that the consumer spent through the holiday retail season?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, it's like theoretically people shouldn't be spending this much money still, especially looking at food and gas costs. Like theoretically people should not have as much money at this point to be buying as much as they are. And it's definitely something that is confounding, economists and other sort of people who watch the space. I think it is a sign of more Fed rate increases to come. The economy should theoretically be cooling off way more quickly than it is right now, but it's just not. So definitely Fed rate increases is something to keep looking out for 2023. We saw in quarter 2 and 3 of this year that durable goods purchases adjusted for inflation did decrease year over year. I would expect it to also decrease in this quarter, but perhaps not. So we'll definitely be following that. But there is one professor who I spoke to for this piece had a kind of a funny unfortunately true and disturbing kind of quote, which is that perhaps for Christmas, if you can't afford airfare or the cost of driving home for Christmas, maybe you're just sending a present over Amazon. So that could also be something that does increase good spend, is that, maybe you can't travel where you want to go, so you're buying presents instead. And that's kind of an unfortunate trend because, quality time is probably more important than, buying gifts. But that's really where things are right now, that the travel and fuel is just way more expensive than it was last year.
And Rachel, to your earlier point, especially with consumers really continuing to spend really far past their would-be capabilities financially. I mean, we look at the savings rate, it's at the lowest level in over 15 years. I think you have to go back to somewhere mid-2005 to see a savings rate this low, under 3% percentage points. But when we see what's going on with a lot of the consumption, credit card utilization skyrocketing, do you think that there's a lot more folks leaning on buy now, pay later programs that are really going to start to come to the light when we get into the early parts of 2023?
I'm sure that that's becoming more and more common. I don't have the data in front of me, so I can't make a statement whether or not. But I do think the buy now, pay later, those are particularly helpful with those like big budget or those big expenses, like let's say a mattress or a piece of furniture. And people are spending less on furniture and those other sort of like big expenses, or let's say a laptop, or I'm like looking around my room like, what else is a big expense? But I think the buy now, pay later is most beneficial or most used in terms of like those big ticket expenses. But I don't know if airlines have buy now, pay later, but I imagine if they do, that's definitely getting used a lot.
It's crazy to think about. And Anthony, this question is also for you as much as it is for Rachel. Back in the middle of the summer, someone asked us on FreightWaves Mailbag, like, what concerns you the most going into the second half of the year? And I said, it's that moment where the consumer has like the, oh my gosh moment, I can't live like this. And I genuinely thought that it was going to happen closer to the end of Q3 and that we weren't still going to be seeing people being like, yeah, I can just spend this money. But do you guys both think, Rachel, I'll start with you, do you think that we are in for that moment of the consumer finally realizing I've got to change my spending habits, I've got to change what I'm buying and when I'm buying it? Or do you think that we're still going to continue to see this progress?
I mean, personally, I definitely had my like, okay, I can't really keep buying clothes and furniture or whatnot as I did in 2021. I think, especially with the federal stimulus and the fact that you weren't really able to, travel or go out to eat, go out to movies, go out to sporting events. Like, I think consumers just had a bit more extra cash to spend, basically. And we have seen durable goods expenses decrease, or durable good spend decrease adjusted for inflation. But again, it's just not really where you think it is. So it's definitely a really strange time in the economy right now, because certain things are still really hot and certain things are about to collapse or like currently collapsing.
Anthony, do consumers have their oh snap moment here soon?
I think they do, but I think it's going to be far too late. I think we'll see a shift in the jobs market, and that's when a lot of consumers will say, oh, wow, this is not where I should be right now.
Okay. All right, guys. Well, thank you. Rachel, thank you for coming on. Great to have you, and we will talk to you soon. If we don't talk to you this week, again, happy Christmas.
Yeah, thanks to you too.
All right, now we're going to welcome on our next guest, and that is the one and only Mike Baudendistel, and he's going to tell us a little bit about everything we need to know about CPG going into 2023. Mike, thanks for being here this morning.
Hey, good to see you guys. So before getting into CPG, which I'm going to talk about this afternoon on the stock out, I'd like to go through just a little bit of what happened last week with the railroad hearings. So there were two, pretty important railroad hearings last week. One was the Surface Transportation Board, so that's the group that economically regulates the railroads, had a 2-day hearing on Union Pacific's use of embargoes. So an embargo is when a railroad basically gives a shipper a little bit of notice and says, well, you're moving too many privately owned rail cars into these serving yards, into these terminals, and you need to throttle that back. And so they basically cause the shippers to meter those cars. And so instead of maybe the shipper wants to move 10 a day, they can only move 3 a day or 5 a day or 1 a day or not any at all. And so that's the type of thing that tends to be used when there's a hurricane, flood, polar vortex. But they've been using it more frequently. They've used it 1,000 times this year. So that was an important hearing. And then also the Federal Railroad Administration conducted a notice of proposed rulemaking, basically a comment session, whether there should be a federal law requiring 2-man crews in locomotives. Right now, there's no federal rule. There's just union rules that mandate, 2 individuals in a locomotive long haul, sort of the locomotive engineer and the conductor at all times, sort of with a few exceptions like, yards and those things. So it's something that, could make that, 2-person crew really sort of cemented in the law if there ended up being a federal law. So both those things are pretty important. Really what I gathered from Union Pacific's use on embargoes was that I thought the shippers made a good case that really the railroads were using those embargoes excessively, and it's a violation of the railroad's common carrier obligation to provide a reasonable level of service. The level of service hasn't been reasonable. The shippers say, well, the 7-day notice is ridiculous. It should be a 30-day notice. That a lot of these things are just sort of causing the shippers to use the railroads owned rail cars instead of the shippers owned rail cars. They say once they get on embargo, they don't know how to get off of the embargo. So shippers are pretty upset about that. The railroads basically say, well, this is sort of a situation where we need to make the whole network streamlined, and in order to do that, we need to throttle back on certain customers that are sort of clogging the network. This regulated Surface Transportation Board, for its point of view, maybe a little bit hard to gather, other than that they continue to be concerned about the degree of railroad competition. It seems that the railroads don't have the resources to handle sort of any surge in volume, any sort of unusual weather activity. If they're just sort of really at the sort of the bare minimum of resources. And they don't seem to think that this is an appropriate use of embargoes. So I think you could see in the coming year or two, the Surface Transportation Board issue more sort of work or sort of more orders for service, sort of the way you did with the Foster Farms, where the Union Pacific had to expedite those animal feed trains this past year. It was an unusual step. I don't know if it's going to be as unusual of a step going forward. So I think there could be sort of minimum service requirements that the Surface Transportation Board imposes, with more concern over the shipper's interest. So I think that's pretty important. And then on the 1-man crews versus 2-man crews, I think the likelihood is there ends up being a law at some point, federal law requiring 2-person crews on the train consists, and that would make it so the unions could not potentially negotiate that away to a 1-person crew in further rounds of negotiation.
So, Mike, we asked Joanna about that and the changing of the crews last week when the FRA hearing was about to start. And I asked kind of like how that would impact the precision scheduled railroading initiative that's kind of trying to go on. And there's this like constant kind of like, I would almost call it like circular tension in the railroads, right? Like, do we need 2 people? Can we do 1 people? Are we PSR? Are we not PSR? How does that coincide if there is any work together being done by both of those things?
Yeah, so on the embargoes, the regulators basically blame the precision scheduled railroading for a lot of these issues, for basically running the trains too lean, not having enough people, taking too much capital out of the capital budget, all of those things. So they really view the PSR. I mean, maybe not also not only not having enough workers for general staffing, but the fact that it's caused so many issues with having workers not get the home time. It's caused all those morale issues too, and then it's hard to get the workers back to work once they've been furloughed. So the regulators really see PSR as kind of the issue with the embargoes. As far as the 1-man crew versus 2-man crew, if that federal law goes into effect, then it would just sort of be status quo. The railroads would say, well, that law, it would be sort of out of date, considering that there's been advancements in safety. The positive train control, that's an overlay system designed to stop a train in the event of human error. So under most circumstances, really 1 person in a train, just a locomotive engineer, is fine. It's just that you would miss that second person when there are exceptions like train separation or just something unusual happens where you need crews to get to the train. But it's kind of the two arguments that unions make in order to for having to have two-man crews is both service that's going to cause service disruptions, and then also safety, that you need that sort of second set of eyes to make sure that the locomotive engineer is doing everything that he should be doing.
And Mike, is that really going to be the primary reason that the rule is really coming from the union side, is that this is a safety issue, or is this really making sure that we have as many folks on the ground as possible and being sure that we can put our union members to work here?
I think the official reason is going to be safety. So like some of the documents that they were talking about, I mean, they were talking about some of these unusual circumstances like the Lac-Mégantic disaster, which is one of the worst railroad incidents in the history of the industry, happened, I guess, about 10 years ago, thereabouts. But I think safety will be sort of the primary focus there. That Federal Railroad Administration, their main objective is to ensure the safety of the railroad. I would feel perfectly safe if there was just one person in the locomotive, because I do think that the technology has advanced to a point where a lot of those issues should be mitigated, but I just don't see it happening where we're going to have one person in a train long haul.
It's going to be interesting to watch for sure. Mike, you mentioned talking CPG this afternoon on the Stockout. What do we have on tap for today?
So I'm going to go through what I think the biggest trends of 2023 will be with CPG, and I think it's going to be a year, hopefully, of margin recovery for a lot of these companies. I think it's going to be one where, just talking to Rachel a minute ago about how the consumer is behaving, I do think you're going to see a tick up, maybe more than a tick up, in elasticities there, where consumers change their behavior in response to some of those rising prices. We've seen more of that lately, but a lot of those products are up 15% year over year, and that's on top of being up close to 10 the previous year. So I think consumers are going to back off a little bit on some of those purchases. And there's also going to be various things to watch in supply chain, sort of cutting SKUs, things of that nature.
Mike, I'm excited to get this upcoming episode of the Stockout. What time can people catch that?
So it'll be live at 2 p.m. Eastern today, and it'll be available on the podcasting services.
All right, Mike, thank you for that. We'll catch you this afternoon on the Stockout. Right now, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We'll be right back in just a few minutes. The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com. FreightWaves Now. It's time for our second check of the weather. And while we are watching that cold air slowly start to move down to the south-southeast, we've got some moisture already in place, which is going to create this kind of chance for some wintry weather. And you know what? We're going to talk about the possibilities of maybe seeing a white Christmas, as we are just about 6 days out from Christmas. Let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events right now. We talked about how that cold air is already in place up across the northwestern parts of the plains, Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming. And we do have the moisture and that start of the disturbance slowly starting to move up from the southwest. When those two combine, that's going to cause a really kind of potent winter storm that will impact everywhere across the Great Lakes into the Midwest, Ohio River Valley as well. And because that cold air is already in place, we can expect to see some heavy snowfall rates and really a lot of snow out of this, not a whole lot of mixed precipitation. There won't be a whole lot of melting going on. Closer down here in the southeast, we've got moisture across southeastern Texas moving up along the Gulf Coast. And this is running into some upper level cold air right now. So that's why we're seeing the mixed precipitation and the snowfall on the radar. None of this is actually hitting the ground right now. This is way far up in the atmosphere. So we're not actually seeing any mixed precip or snow falling here across the northern parts of Mississippi, Alabama, and into western Tennessee, but we are getting that cold air and the possibility for some showers to mix in. Folks across the eastern parts of Texas, Austin into Houston, San Antonio, and along that Gulf Coast up through the Texas Gulf Coast into New Orleans can expect to see some heavy rainfall today. And as far as chances for a white Christmas go, basically, if you live north of Colorado, Kansas, Missouri, Kentucky, northward, your chances are pretty good. Anywhere down here to the southeast, there's still just a little bit of a shot, but not looking super likely for us down here. Unfortunately, I really wanted to see some snow for Christmas. That's it for our second check of the weather. We're going to pass things back on over to Isaiah for our next look at the social roundabout.
Welcome into Social Roundabout, everyone. I'm Isaiah Buchanan, and we are less than 1 week away from Christmas, and it seems that Santa might be getting a little antsy. He made a stop at a store and showed off a little bit of his dance moves. Take a look at this. Looks like I may be having to switch up my Christmas list a little bit and maybe get Trucker Santa instead of bringing me what I had on my list, maybe switching that out for some new dance moves. Switching things up a little bit, we're going to be talking about Elon Musk and Twitter. So Elon put out a poll yesterday asking if he should step down as head of Twitter. He says, I will abide by the results of this poll, and 57% of people voted yes. He later posted after this poll was finished saying, be careful what you wish for, you just might get it. Now, coming up in our next hit, somebody else, another famous person, has put out a poll asking if they should take over Twitter, and we're going to let you know who that is coming up in our last hit of Social Roundabout today. But one more thing that I would like to talk about is the World Cup. Argentina defeated France yesterday to win the 2022 World Cup. This video right here shows the last penalty kick that won it for France. This game was absolutely incredible. It went into extra time. Messi scored with about 10 minutes remaining in extra time, and then France's Mbappe scored with only 3 minutes left in extra time. Mbappe ended up having a hat trick. He had 3 goals in that game, and then he also made his penalty kick. Messi and Argentina just had a little bit more in the tank for the penalty kicks. They ended up winning 4-1 in the penalty kicks. So shout out to Argentina, Messi, the GOAT of soccer, for bringing home the 2022 World Cup. Next year, though, we have the Women's World Cup. It's about 215 days away, so we'll be looking forward to that. That's all I have for this edition of the Social Roundabout. But right now, we're going to take a look at the last 24 hours in freight with our market update.
Anthony, it makes me a little sad to say this, but we only have 3 more episodes of FreightWaves Now for the year.
That's right, but there's still so much that you can go through because we put out a lot of content, and chances are there's something that you haven't seen, some events that you haven't quite gotten to just yet, so you can watch that on demand at tv.freightwaves.com. Also, we have a lot more stuff coming up in 2023.
Absolutely. Our first virtual event will be January 12th, so less than a month away for the Sales and Marketing Summit. That one is free to go to, so if you blew your budget on Christmas presents, you know what, that's okay. You can tune in anyways. And we're going to be excited to host you for that one. Also super excited to host you for the very last FreightWaves Now of the season. This Thursday, we will have a look at a year in review for us here at FreightWaves. It was a big one. We did a lot. We brought back in-person events. We hosted F3. We broke some records, and we were excited to do it with you viewers. So we're going to break that down.
That's right. And when I got to look at some of the biggest stories throughout this year, I was so surprised about wow, that was this year, because there's just so many things that happened.
So many
Thinking
things.
about the Canadian protests, it was just such
Crazy.
a big year.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. We'll be right back with our second hour of FreightWaves Now right after this.
When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
It's a good day coming.
When you have thousands of trucks delivering billions of pounds of freight, you need the right equipment, the right technology, and the right team. At XPO, we provide tuition-free training at 130 XPO driver schools across the country, and the tools drivers need to be at the top of their game, providing rewarding careers for our team members and top-notch service for our customers.
While continuing to deliver LTL freight on time and damage-free.
XPO, your freight, first.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. In this carrier update, Donny, let's start here looking at a map, looking obviously where the tightest markets are in the country. No surprise, it's especially in the reefer market, it is in those areas where colder weather is settling in.
Let's start on the West Coast. You know, we ran some lanes last week, running out of Portland, running out of Seattle. We've seen those lanes pick up a lot. But moving back across, this area is the newest area that we saw picking up. We saw it changing. We saw the blues in there. And this is going to progressively get worse. Let's start back over here at Montana. This is going to progressively get worse as this cold air mass moves in. Like I say, now we have loads that are regular drive-in loads, and they're not going to be rejected. They're already accepted more than likely. They're going to be canceled and then flipped over to the spot market real quick because they're going, it's going to be 17 degrees or 10 degrees. We now need to stick it on a reefer. So we could see some boost up, and it's going to be very volatile on these rates. It's not going to be, it's going to be hard to find the average. It's going to be finding somebody that day, and that's in that area in maybe the middle of Kansas. And you could pay some pretty high rates. It depends on the time sensitivity. Do you need it there before Christmas? Or is it going to be after Christmas, because this cold air mass is going to last. It's hitting Tennessee on Thursday, so it's going to cover the majority of the nation.
Yeah,
you're going to see places down here in Florida that are below freezing, not below zero, below freezing, which it does happen.
Mm-hmm.
Not often, though.
No, it definitely happens. I can attest. I've lived it. So.
Yeah. So keep an eye out. Pretty calm here in the southeast, in the normal parts of the Midwest. You see Indianapolis here picking up a little bit, a small shade of blue, and as well as Atlanta as well. Lots of volumes in these markets. Just not, the rejection rates just aren't very high, which means everything's running for contracted freight. So if you're looking in these markets, you better get ahead of yourself and try to find your freight kind of with, don't wait till the day that you get in there.
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be tough sledding if you do.
And you might be sitting. And then, of course, if you get to this weekend, you might be sitting all weekend because Christmas is on Sunday. Everybody's going to try to wrap everything and be off work early Friday and maybe out by noon if you can. And then if you're there on Saturday looking for a load, or Friday afternoon, you may have nothing and you may be sitting or deadheading very far to find your next load.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go to the next chart here. Looking at the pressure on shippers, you see it starting to pick up just slightly, Tony. So this is another reason that carriers need to push their rates up for the reefer rates. You're seeing a little bit of pressure now, and this might continue. Next chart here, real quick here, we can fire through these. NTI, this is disappointing, Tony. NTI dropped down to 248, and this is not the time of the year. I was expecting it to kind of continue possibly on up. But these are those ups and downs, that volatility that we talked about of who's in control. Shipper, carrier, we know shippers are in control. As carriers fight back, they lose ground. Fight back, then lose ground. And that's what we're seeing here in these rates.
Absolutely. Well, Donny, thank you for this update. We'll be sure to check in with you again a little later. Right now, we'll toss it over to Kaylee and Anthony.
All right, guys, thank you for that. All right, now we're going to welcome in our next live guest. We've got David Stone joining us from Ryder. David, thank you for being here today. We're going to talk a little bit about some new offerings from the brokerage side of things.
Appreciate it.
And David, jumping into it, let's talk about this topic because we have a new drop and hook trailer service for freight brokerages. Can you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, from the standpoint of drop and hook is really, it's becoming kind of the quintessential part of the freight brokerage spread. I know a lot of companies are kind of partnering with different trailer providers. And really, it's just becoming this need inside of this market in the current market conditions. And so I think for us, we've had obviously a ton of trailers inside of the Ryder network, but we also get an opportunity to partner with a new Ryder offering called Coop, and I think Coop is an exciting piece of the Ryder business as a whole, and when partnered up with the freight brokerage side of things, I think that it's a win-win across the board for our shippers and our carriers.
So I think a lot of the time the name of the game is diversification, right? Survival and thriving in a market where but conditions might be a little bit uncertain has to do with how well you can diversify your offerings and really reach out to those people who are maybe looking for a super unique solution. Do you feel like that is something that Ryder is really looking to with this solution, is taking a company that is a legacy company, you guys are really good at what you do, and now trying to branch out into these different diverse offerings for more customers?
Yeah, I think, really the name of the game for us is listen to our customers, and whether that is the customers from a dedicated perspective, whether that's a fully managed customer, or whether that's a customer on the freight brokerage, it's really just listen to the customers. And at the end of the day, our real motto is be an extension of the supply chain for that given customer. And I think you're hearing this a lot in the current environment that we're in is, hey, we need flexibility. We need flexibility, whether that's due to warehousing labor shortages, whether that's just purely due to forecasting issues, whether that's due to supply chain issues. We just need flexibility. And so I think, when you take that at the macro point of view and you say, hey, if I'm an extension of that customer, what can I do to help solve this? Number one, Ryder does have a ton of ability to quickly ramp up programs from an asset-based part of the business. But number two, the piece for us is Ryder has a ton of other offerings that are already out in the market. It's just a matter of us partnering with those folks. And that's what's so exciting about what we're doing is we've partnered with Coop, which, Coop is 6,000 trailers that are out there listed today. I think that they have a plan to get up to 50,000 trucks and trailers shortly. And they're growing 250% year over year. So, putting that together with the Ryder Freight brokerage offering, really, we can go into a customer at any given location in any given market condition and provide that solution for that customer and be an extension of that customer's supply chain. So I think that's what's so exciting about what we're doing today. It's different than, say, a traditional drop and hook in the sense of going out there and buying our own or leasing our own trailers. That's definitely a direction for future that we'll want to go in. But I think what we do right now is we have an immediate ability to ramp up a drop and hook program for our customers, and we're seeing the impact of that. Our customers are calling us, asking us every day about it. Our customers are asking us if we can support them in certain markets that maybe they haven't been supported from a drop and hook solution in the past. And I think that's a huge win for us. And I think on the carrier side, you're seeing it too. We have carriers calling us every day that maybe haven't previously partnered with an asset-based type of brokerage because that, in the typical model, they are the ones that would lose that freight first when the fleet turns around and takes all that freight back. And so I think you're seeing a lot of our carrier partners that want to come in and partner with us as we kind of roll out this drop and hook program.
And David, one of the great points that you made earlier is really that flexibility is needed, especially with this current market conditions. With this offering, do you see this as really a short-term benefit or something that's really going to be something needed as we continue to move forward in the industry in 2023 and beyond?
Yeah, it's funny because I was talking with somebody the other day about drop and hook, and we got into the conversation about college football, obviously, big time of the year. And the reference that I gave is, the drop and hook almost is like a spread offense when the spread offense originally rolled out. It provides this ability for shippers that normally wouldn't be able to compete in some of these markets. It provides them that ability to go off and compete. Maybe they don't have the labor ability. Maybe they don't have the ability to run 24 hours, 7 days a week. So this drop and hook allows them the chance to really focus on kind of what they're doing inside the warehouse and have the ability to bring these trailers in when they need to. They can partner with us in terms of the movement of those trailers. And so I don't think it's a short-term play. I think shippers are figuring out that this is the way of the future. And I think shippers are figuring out that, this really makes up for maybe some of the issues with forecasting or some of the issues with supply chain or some of the issues with just overall inventory levels inside of their warehouses. And gives them ability to really run their business in a different model. So I think it's here to stay. I think that the more that shippers figure out what they can do with the drop trailer program, I think the more that you'll start to see this in RFPs. I think the more that you'll see this almost as a requirement or a ticket to even come dance with the shipper is you must have a drop and hook type of program in play, just like we saw a few years ago with EDI type of technology.
So getting brokerage to learn about this and to really start to get on board and integrating it as an offering for them, obviously that is a way to help your brokerage grow super successfully. But what are some of those first initial steps to say, hey, maybe you want to start this and maybe you're offering it for just a select few of your shippers that you can do it really well for, but then eventually plans to roll it out for all of your clients. How do you start that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think, at the end of the day, freight brokerage, it's not rocket science, right? How do you grow your freight brokerage? You grow it with customers. And how do you continue to grow with those customers? Well, you continue to penetrate those customers and continue to solve those customers' needs. And so I think as we kind of look at this piece, we did the obvious solution, which is let's go off and let's figure out the lanes that we need or that could support a drop trailer. And we went through the entire analysis piece on it. And then we went through and took a look at all the customers that are inside those lanes and matched up those customers with this specific lanes that we felt a drop trailer program would be beneficial on. But I think, the thing that we find that is most interesting is it really starts with that customer that's willing to partner with you. I think in this market, in this day and age, we talk a lot about what does that partnership really look like? Well, this is one where we can go to a customer and say, we can offer this to you. Are you willing to partner with us on this? Are you willing to support us on this? And if so, then we think that we're going to be able to support your business on this. And that's really what we found is we've partnered with a couple really solid customers, regardless of what lanes those customers need the drop trailers on. And we've built it out from there. And I think that's the name of the game. Go to your customer, partner with them, really build out that partnership. And this provides really that true partnership ability.
And David, this definitely sounds like this is a huge step forward and something that's going to be needed in the industry as we continue to move forward. If people want to get in touch with you or find a little bit more about this service, how can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So our website is always available, and that's Ryder.com. And you can always go on there and find out information on the freight brokerage. But the easiest piece is just reach out to me. I mean, we're all over social media. We're all over, all of the platforms to make sure that folks can reach us. And whether that's carriers or whether that's customers, we're here for them, and we want to be able to support them in the future.
Great stuff, David. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a very happy holiday, and we will catch up with you guys in the new year.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Over to Sydney Edwards. She's got a 10 a.m. check of your top stories this morning.
With a full look at our headlines for the day, I'm Sydney Edwards. Now, company leaders at UPS are already throwing around plans for what may happen if the Teamsters Union decides to strike if a contract is not put in place next year. The current contract expires on August 1st of next year, which will affect 38,000 workers. Experts say organized labor currently has more leverage in Congress and with the public court of opinion, so that threat of a strike should not be taken lightly. UPS is preparing to tell its managers not to schedule any paid time off in July and August in case there is a strike. Now, that move shows that the company plans on continuing operations even if an agreement is not reached. Trailer manufacturers are pulling in strong new orders to meet pent-up and replacement demand, even with the signs of a slowing economy. Preliminary orders for dry and refrigerated vans and flatbeds totaled 39,000 units in November, according to ACT Research, which was a 22% increase year over year. However, that number was down 17% from October, which saw a huge intake of 48,000 orders. Now, large for-hire and private fleets are driving demand, according to manufacturer Great Dane. Once final November results are available, the industry-wide trailer backup should increase by around 13,500 units. And German national railway company Deutsche Bahn AG is ready to sell its profitable logistics market, DB Schenker, or offer its shares on the public market. The parent company said it will explore the potential sale of the fourth largest logistics provider in the world by revenue after a vote by its board of directors. Revenue from any sale would be used to pay down the company's heavy debt load. The rationale for a sale is that DB Schenker could grow faster as a company fully focused on logistics, while Deutsche Bahn would focus on its passenger and freight rail business. And Union Pacific has been named on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for North America, an annual metric that gauges companies' commitments to sustainability. The index represents the top 20% of the largest 600 American companies in the S&P based on certain criteria. UP, CSX, Canadian National, and Canadian Pacific were also named on the list. This was UP's first time appearing in the index thanks to a handful of sustainability initiatives put in place during 2021. And Tesla could announce its first automotive assembly plant in Mexico soon. The automaker is reportedly acquiring land in Nuevo Leon, a Mexican state bordering Texas, and will produce the new Semi, its all-electric Class 8 truck, at the site. And the facility will be about 140 miles from the border crossing in Laredo, Texas. Back in August, the Nuevo Leon government announced Tesla would have its own lane at the border crossing to facilitate trade for local automotive suppliers. Tesla debuted its long-awaited Semi earlier this month at the company's headquarters in Austin, Texas. For those headlines and more, of course, you can log on to FreightWaves.com. And if you're watching on our YouTube channel, don't forget to like and subscribe. You can get the full FreightWaves TV experience by downloading the FreightWaves app or logging on to tv.freightwaves.com. After the break, we'll put someone on the hot seat. Stay tuned.
The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
So, you need to reroute a large shipment from LA to Boston. With XPO, you can make it happen with one call to right here. An XPO team with local connections that will help find a solution. We've spent over 35 years perfecting LTL freight operations to make it easy for our customers to do business with us. Why? Because we're driven to be the best.
XPO, your freight first.
Welcome back to FreightWaves Now. Time for our third check of the weather this morning. We're talking again about the budding winter storm that's going to impact everywhere from the Central Plains up to the Midwest by the time that we round through this week and get into the Christmas holiday. Going to make Christmas travel a nightmare. Those last-minute freight loads getting out before the holiday also incredibly difficult to manage. So let's check it out in Sonar Critical Events right now. Cold air starting to be in place all the way across from the Dakotas down into the central parts of the Great Lakes, and we're starting to see some moisture move in as well, and the energy with that disturbance starting to pull up from the south-southwest. The real big impacts are going to come because the cold air is already there, and it will be there as the moisture arrives. Normally when we talk about are we going to see a big winter storm, or are we not going to see a big winter storm, it's the uncertainty is because we're not sure of the connection between the moisture and the cold air. Normally one is there and one is not, but this time that cold air is there, and as the moisture arrives, it's going to really ramp up the ability for snow, for ice, for really all types of winter weather. Going to be seeing some strong winds come out of this, and it's going to be so cold that even as the snow and the precipitation moves out and we see that sunshine return to the areas, it's not going to be able to melt any of that. So we're talking about really icy to impossible travel conditions, especially in those areas, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, northern parts of Illinois, where when you get that cold, the way that salt crews and brine crews get on the roadways to really try and help out that traffic and melt the ice doesn't work just because it is so cold out there. We're going to also start to see that cold air filter down here into the southeast, Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, even Florida getting below freezing by the time that the actual weekend of Christmas arrives. So no matter where you're headed, make sure that you bundle up and take care of yourself and your equipment if you're running out there at all this week and into the end of next week. That's it for weather right now. We'll take one more look before we're done here for the show. However, it's cold in the United States, but it is hot in the seat, and Sydney Edwards is here for a hot seat segment.
Welcome in again to the hot seat. This is where we take an unsuspecting individual, give them 10 questions where they have to answer us, and today our unsuspecting individual is Cold Chain Community's leader, Sydney Edwards. Sydney, how you doing?
I am so good, and I'm very excited
You're so excited for this, aren't you?
So excited, and I don't know what you're going to ask me.
No. So this is fun for all of us. So first question for you. Are you ready for 10?
Yes.
All right. What is the biggest problem in freight you see going on right now?
I'm going to take a different approach to this one. And
Okay.
I'm going to say that the biggest issue in freight is that the general public has no idea what is going on and does not understand this industry at all. And I think a lot of headache would be solved. A lot of stories would make more sense that we in the industry see out there if the general public understood what this industry was about. And it's not too difficult to understand and, the basics of it, but nobody knows. Nobody knows what's happening here.
That's a great answer. Number 2, you're on a 1,000-mile road trip in a cab, and you have one artist you can listen to for the entire trip. Who you picking?
Ooh, okay, this is a good one. I might have to say, I guess I would have to say Rainbow Kitten Surprise, since they were my top artist on Spotify this year. And 2 or 3 of their songs were in my top song list, as well as them being my top artist. So probably Rainbow Kitten Surprise. They jam. They just totally jam.
Excellent answer then. Number 3, what is your favorite story that you've had a chance to either see or talk about on FreightWaves this year?
I know this is switching things up, but can I talk about a story that I haven't actually been able to nail an interview for?
Okay, sure.
Because I've talked about it on my show, but I have yet to actually have somebody really dive deep into it. And it's, of course, it's going to be something cold chain related. So it would be all of the cold chain solutions in underdeveloped countries because they are off grid, because they don't have the resources that other countries do, and the solutions that they're finding to cold chain supply chain issues.
That is a great answer. Let me move on here. We got six more to go, and or actually 7 more to go, and hopefully you've got good answers for those as well. Number 4, what do you think is going to be mainstream in freight in 10 years that is not mainstream now?
Of course, specifically talking cold chain, it'll be monitoring devices. Everyone's going to be using them. Everyone's jumping on the bandwagon now, and they should be. In my personal opinion, everybody should be using, monitoring devices throughout routes. And eventually, everybody will be using them at some point, and they won't have to rely on pen and paper and Excel sheets anymore. They'll be using devices that attach to the cloud to figure out what's happening through the routes, mitigating all the risk that happens every day.
Yep, so we'll be joining the 21st century, hopefully.
Exactly.
Number 5, you go to a convenience store on a road trip. What is your go-to food-drink combo?
Okay, so on a road trip, and I picked this up when one of my friends and I, we used to go on trips like every couple of months, and just like, driving at least something that was 4 or 5 hours away from us, we'd always get Lifesaver gummies, the fruity ones that have a bunch of different flavors to them, and I'm not necessarily like a soda pop or like energy drink person, so I would just get a water bottle. But I also love the buffalo blue cheese combos. They're like in this light blue bag, and those are the best flavor of combos. I would absolutely get Lifesavers and combos.
All right, there you go. Number 6, you get to have dinner with one person in freight, living or dead. Who do you want to have dinner with?
Maybe like the CEO of Lineage Logistics.
Okay.
I think I would do maybe that. I think maybe I would do that. CEO of Lineage Logistics.
All right, okay.
Let's talk.
All right, there we go. Number 7, biggest surprise that you felt when because you're in the industry, not too much like me, we're kind of newborns to it. What was the biggest surprise you felt when you got into the industry?
How enthusiastic everybody in the industry is about talking about the industry in general. Kind of like I mentioned earlier, everyday people don't understand what's happening here, and everyone is pretty proud of the work that they do in the industry, and they've been so welcoming, they've been so inviting, and so willing to teach me anything about the industry and, let it be known what it is that this is all about.
Excellent. All right. So, number 8, you grew up in Ohio, I think it was. You've spent time in Nebraska. Which state has the better winters?
The better winters? Mm-hmm. Nebraska's winters aren't as long, and it's always sunny in Nebraska. It could be raining, it could be snowing, it is always sunny, and it is nearly a dark cloud every single day.
But which are better for you?
Because there's also so much wind in Nebraska too. My first couple weeks there, I got windburn because I just wasn't used to there being no trees anywhere. Yeah. Okay, so I think I have to say, because I really do miss a white Christmas, Ohio.
Okay, there you go. Number 9, best piece of advice you've ever gotten, not in freight, because you have a background in news, best piece of advice you've ever gotten in news.
I think my best piece of advice was from one of our photographers at my first station, and it was, of course, my first news station, my first job out of college, and the advice was, you're not going to be an expert at this like anytime soon. You're not going to catch what you're doing and really understand how things work at least a year into the job. And I have used that in every job I've had since then, because I put this pressure on myself, I'm sure other people do, to be amazing at what you're doing immediately. And if it's something new, that's not going to happen. So to give yourself time to learn things and not put so much pressure on yourself to be an expert, because it's not going to happen until it happens.
Gotcha. And lastly, number 10, fill in the blank. Freight is blank.
Freight is crazy and ever-changing. Freight is The meaning of everything. The backbone of literally everything we do.
Yep.
Freight is crazy.
There you go. Sydney Edwards, you are off the hot seat.
Thank you. When guests come to an event like F3, we know what they want is a chance to show off their products, their swag, and make new partnerships that will last until our next FreightWaves event.
But the problem is there are so many industry events, it can be so hard to find the right one to invest your time and energy in. We at FreightWaves take your investment seriously.
Which is why we've brought together thousands of industry professionals in one city over 3 days to showcase all you have to offer.
Because your successful connections at an event like F3 move all of us forward.
Don't believe us?
Join us in June.
This is an LTL freight cross-dock facility, and we have locations like this all across North America. East Coast, West Coast, even our neighbors to the north and south. At XPO, our network helps us deliver 18 billion pounds of freight every year to 99% of US zip codes and beyond. And now, it's getting even bigger because we're adding 900 new doors to our terminals. XPO, your freight first.
What does this have to do with freight? Well, I'm glad you asked. People are wondering what's going to happen with inflation. Is there going to be hyperinflation? When is hyperinflation going to be here? When is there going to be inflation? What's going to happen with inflation? Inflation, inflation, inflation.
This is the sexiest topic within the economy right now.
Welcome into the final carrier update of the morning. Donny, gonna look here, lanes of the day. Gonna start here out of LA. Make sure you've got that reefer button turned on.
Yes, so we're gonna start with reefer since it's Monday. Be sure to use your toggle switch up here in the middle, as Tony says, because that can make a huge difference in your rates, especially when you're bouncing back and forth. If you forget to turn that to the proper type of trailer type, then you can really misquote your loads. And I have done that before. I accidentally quote dry van and not realize I was quoting a reefer. Big mistake, about 25, 30 cents a mile sometimes. All right, so let's go ahead and try picking up here in Los Angeles and route to Las Vegas. Las Vegas, it's one of those cities that absorbs a lot of freight as well and doesn't produce as much freight going out as coming in normally. And of course, there's a very, very large population in Las Vegas, a very dense population. So picking up here in Los Angeles, we're running about $3.20 a mile. Confidence score is only a 1. There's a lot of volatility on this lane depending on probably how soon you pick this load up. Is it early, is it late, or is somebody calling for a pickup in 4 hours? So this can range from 287 to 384. So a pretty big range on this. Currently it's been going down slightly since we've started the month of December, especially coming off a peak there right before Thanksgiving, and you might see this peak again right here as we go close. Really it's going to be coming up this week. So on this lane right here, I start trying to push your rates up already if you're not running it contracted. Hit your little double arrows there, swap this lane around. We're going Las Vegas back to Los Angeles. It's picked back up just a little bit to 327, which is kind of a surprise. But then again, you're also headed back in and you're running these areas that have a lot of high fuel. So both of these rates over $3 a mile. It's pretty good rates here especially about 270 miles, you could make this turn in a day. Leave early in the morning, you'll be getting back late at night, but you'll have your one turn in one day, and averaging over $3 a mile, which you're going to need to do right now in California.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's the key, right? Is you want to make sure your rates in and out of California are paying enough to offset those fuel prices because they are so high.
Otherwise, you're out of business. Very quickly. All right, next lane here. We'll swap over. Let's go Chicago, running over the mountains here down to Charlotte. Again, Chicago's holding a pretty good, a pretty steady high rate, especially even for reefers here. So we're looking at 750 miles at $3.69 a mile. Rates going up as high as 377, as low as the lowest 350. Not a bad rate at all. A pretty long, pretty good long haul here. But the problem is, if you're trying to go back to Chicago, so you hit my little double arrows here, reverse this back around, it's coming in at 214, which is well below your NTI. So you got a little bit over $1 difference, well over $1 difference in those rates. So your average is only going to be around about 270. But still, 270 at 755 miles, you can make that work, Tony.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Donny, thank you so much for the updates this morning. We'll be sure to check in with you again tomorrow. Right now, we'll toss it over to take a look at this morning's roundtable.
And welcome into the roundtable this morning. Bill Priestley here with you, and joining us via remote, we've got Thomas Wasson joining us from the confines of his lovely home, and then also with us in studio, Donny Gilbert, who just ran over here beautifully.
I'm here. I made
You're
it.
ready. All right, we're going to talk about trucking and what this means for, and what has happened, excuse me, in 2022, and what things we can expect possibly in 2023. And Donny, let me just open it up to you. We talked about this a little bit leading up to the show. December 2021 to December 2022, what happened other than everything?
All right, so it's actually one big, if you pull it up on a chart, it's one big hill. It'd be great for sledding since we're talking about cold weather right now.
Sure.
But we started out December 2021. We had volumes, OTVI, around the 15,000 mark. And we had rejection rates a little bit over 20%. Since then, rejection rates, if you go back and hindsight 2020, actually peaked that Christmas and New Year's of 2021 and have been on the downhill ever since. Volumes started to drop off after the first year like normal, and a little bit more than normal, but we dropped down. We had a little bit of a boost about April 15th through July. And I'm talking just a small, and that was probably your produce season. And then after July, they again started their downward track to where we are now. But from July on to current, we started these months where volumes were higher at the beginning of the month and lower at the end of the month. And that was a pretty big sign of how these markets were deteriorating. And we knew there was a problem. Now, of course, I was watching Sydney's on the spot, and like one of the stories that I loved this year was our CEO and founder, Mr. Fuller, coming out, I believe it was late February, early March, talking about the big drop in imports, which we were seeing is we're putting together our Atlas data, and that was showing us, 45 to 70 days in advance, and he was actually able to see a lot of this drop coming up and show us the data behind it, not just to let, hey, it's going to happen, but showing us the data behind it, which was very, very impressive.
All right, Thomas, obviously that's got to be the story of the year. How did you see December 2021 to December 2022 at the enterprise trucking level?
Well, I mean, it could be more like night or day if you look at it. Enterprise trucking fleets, you go from feast, and we're now starting to see, of course, famine. When Donny mentioned those rates in terms of outbound tender volumes, we also had rejection rates. Just beginning that year, even into January, we were around 22% rejection rates, down to like 4% now. So, for a large enterprise carrier, the difference between a 22% rate environment and a 4% rejection rate environment cannot be overstressed, because even though we'll say, well, 4% still has room to go, internally, when you have like thousands of loads each day, that's going to mean that you're now kind of scattering shots, scattering trucks into the wind, because your regular lanes just don't have the volumes that you need consistently, or maybe they're going to spot or carriers or brokers that are undercutting you.
Gotcha. Donny, you mentioned, of course, Craig's article, of course, the other article that Henry Byers put out about imports falling off a cliff, if you will. When you look at that, was there a point at which, if you saw it coming, if you were a small carrier, if you were a mid-sized carrier, that you could do something about it, or was this just an avalanche you couldn't avoid?
Okay, so we've been through this before. It's a boom-bust cycle that happens.
Yeah.
Every quite so often. And one thing I was actually thinking about this last night and really how to say it without sounding bad. What hindsight 2020, not looking at what everybody else thought, but what did you think when Mr. Fuller wrote that article? And what do you think now? And what changes would you have made?
Right.
Knowing, there's a lot of people that were very skeptical about it. But now that you've seen the data play out, now that we've seen it all play out, you could have made a lot of good changes from that data right then. And that could have helped you out right now, whether it be maybe unloading some trucks, because right then used truck prices were at very peak levels. And then that could have saved you from having trucks now that are sitting up against the wall because you don't maybe have the volumes or don't have the drivers to run them. There could have been a lot of changes, and everybody's changes would have been a little bit different depending on how you run your companies. Are you a big enterprise company? Are you a smaller trucking company that's very heavy on contracted freight? Do you have a high percentage of exposure to spot market? All these guys could have made different changes if they knew it was coming up, but the problem is, we told them, and there were signs that it was coming up. Now, we couldn't have told you that it was the exact day, but we knew it was coming.
Thomas, looking at this from an enterprise trucking perspective, obviously the big guys can afford to take big kind of stressful famine times and work off of them. Question going forward here. Now, obviously big companies like to grow, and they've been growing in this kind of downtime through merger and acquisition or those kinds of things. What do you see moving forward as we perhaps hopefully very soon hit the bottom of this economy and then start coming back up? Do you see more of that, or do you see them continuing on a more traditional path that we've seen in years prior?
Well, I mean, we're going to see large trucking companies that have been around for decades. This is just another part of the cycle. More of the same. They're going to have some cuts. Obviously, we may see layoffs. We've encountered experience that in certain parts and certain companies. But anything differently? Well, right now, OEM manufacturers, we are going to see more activity. And we're seeing that in like ACT research, FTR intelligence, where Class 8 orders still have a lot of demand. So, I mean, fleets are first and foremost going to upgrade their tractor counts. And, they're going to reduce that average age to save on maintenance costs, as well as, try to attract new drivers. So we know we're still going to buy trucks. Mergers and acquisitions, yeah, this is a great time. Large carriers love to buy smaller carriers because, kind of like if they're sickly and small, you can take their tractors and you can grow your truck count relatively easy. It's hard to remember. Over the road, our large trucking companies often have difficulties, depending upon the market, on actually hiring more drivers because they often are taking ones out of CDL school. Usually experienced drivers matriculate into smaller carriers. So when you buy up a smaller carrier, it's kind of a way for you to get some back. But final thoughts here. When the market gets soft, there's a lot of opportunity to grow when it's soft. And then when you have more trucks, it gets better when it's high. Will we see these large enterprise carriers try to increase their fleet count when the conditions are favorable? Or do you think they'll continue to take kind of a more muted approach because they've been stifled with lack of new truck orders, which kind of was the story for the past 2 years, which didn't allow them to capitalize on these really, really high rates from a tractor total count standpoint?
Gotcha. Donny, let's go back to kind of the owner-operator, also the small fleet. You mentioned, of course, we had the signs. We saw the signs. We could have done something at that point. Now, December 2022, is there a right move now? Is there something that people should be doing now to try and get the most out of what they can in 2023?
All right. So a lot of it, yes, there is. A lot of it would have started back when we started this in February. Do you go buy a brand new truck because you're making good money? Well, the answer might have been no, unless you were saving up. But right now, you need to obviously trim your fat to be a very lean company. And there's different ways you do that. One is fueling. As me and Tony sat up here and talked about, there could be different fuel stations within 30 miles that could have a 30, 40 different cent per gallon. And you need to find those stations. You need to fuel at those stations, and because that can add up to $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a year at the end of the year of savings, and that might be the difference of you staying in business or not. You need to work with these brokers, work with other carriers, and try to get on some contracted freight. We're getting in this spot market freight. Rates are very low. It can get very difficult. A spot market average rate, including fuel, is almost the exact same as a contracted freight without that 79 cents a mile fuel.
Yeah.
So that's a difference of 79 cents a mile, and that's a lot in this industry.
Going forward, we got about a couple minutes left here, Thomas. Two big issues. Donny already alluded to one of them, of course, fuel costs in 2023. Also, just looking around legislative-wise, obviously the story of the year outside of that and outside of the bloodbath was AB 5 in California in terms of how independent contractors are going to be in. What do you think is going to be the big story in 2023 as we move forward and things that people need to watch out for, especially, for instance, on the enterprise trucking front?
Well, I think Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, in terms of the labor, contractors within large carriers, we're seeing some cases. I think this one's out of Wisconsin with a large enterprise carrier where do these independent contractors or lease purchase folks, or do they have real autonomy? Do they fit the bill? So, when we're looking at what does it mean to be a contractor in trucking, I think that really is going to become a huge question in the coming year. We've seen it with AB5 and independent ones, the smaller ones, but we're now going to see potential more challenges to enterprise level ones, because I remember when I was a load planner, we had contracted drivers, but I'm recommending them loads. They're not I don't want them to see the loads. They're going to cherry pick all the loads. There's always been this thing with trucking, this kind of friction where you want a certain percentage of owner operators to save you costs as a large carrier, but you don't want to give them too much freedom because they can literally wreck your network by cherry picking freight that other drivers who are force dispatched and employees are. So expect to see some movement on that. We'll see if the Supreme Court does pick it up. Obviously, we've got some cases pending, but given the current labor environment, what does it mean to be a contractor, I feel like, is going to be a very big topic to pay attention to.
Donny, what's going to be your story of the year to watch out for in 2023?
It's really going to be the bankruptcies, I think. Okay. Who's going to make it? Who's not going to make it? Yeah. As far down as we expect for spot rates and contracted freights to drop, it's going to push a lot of limits. And these trucking companies that didn't take advantage of this money they brought in the last few years and didn't invest it properly, they're done.
It's going to be an interesting 2023, folks. Well, thanks so much for you guys for joining us here. Let's head it over to Kaylee with weather.
All right, guys, thanks for that. And for more on what we think is going to happen in 2023 and a review of this year, make sure that you join us for the FreightWaves Now year in review on a Thursday morning of this week. Let's finish it out talking about the projected snowfall for this winter storm that's going to shape up across the middle and late parts of the week, possibly making for some very precipitous Christmas travel across the northern parts of the country. It's just going to be downright dangerous out there. Let's check it out. These are going to be forecast snowfall amounts so far. This is day 1 through 7. So this is still pretty long range that we're looking here. So it's not super accurate, but it gives us kind of a general idea of what we've got going on here. So through the next 5 to 7 days, we're expecting a pretty decent amount of snowfall across the northern mountains, the Pacific Northwest, and through the Front Range. That's obvious, right? We are always expecting that. But what we're going to be watching is that winter storm really start to develop across the central Great Plains, up into the Midwest, and then eventually around the Great Lakes. This is going to be more December 22nd through the 23rd. So we're talking Thursday into Friday. But the impacts from this will be felt well through your actual Christmas holiday, so through next weekend as well. Overall, right now, snowfall amounts looking pretty decent around the Great Lakes. Could even see some pieces of lake effect snow start to set up as that cold settles on in. But what we're going to be watching is some of those areas closer down to the south where they don't typically see a whole lot of snow. Some folks from Kansas up through Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, those northern parts of Kentucky, northern Oklahoma, Arkansas, possibly even here in Tennessee, looking at maybe a dusting. But as you get further up towards the north in the Great Lakes, we see more of that snow moving on in. Overall, travel is going to be very difficult through the end of this week. So if you've got any chance to get your Christmas travel done maybe on Wednesday or Thursday this week, I would definitely highly encourage that. For that last minute freight that's running this weekend as well, expect possibly some delays, especially if you're coming out of the Great Lakes region, really going anywhere. That's it for the weather today. We're going to keep an eye on this winter storm as we continue to move through the rest of the week. Right now, we're going to hand it back over to Isaiah for our final check of the social roundabout.
Welcome into Social Roundabout, everyone. I'm Isaiah Buchanan, and we are talking about Christmas. We're literally less than a week away, and it seems that Santa might be getting a little antsy, ready to drop off all those gifts for all around the world. He got to bust a move in front of an office earlier this week. Take a look at this video from TikTok. I may have to ask Santa for some new dance moves on my Christmas list this year rather than what I already had on there previously. Switching things up a little bit, Elon Musk posted a poll on Twitter yesterday asking whether or not he should step down as head of Twitter. He said, "I will abide by the results of this poll." And as you can see, the results of the poll, 57% of people said that he should step down. So we'll see if plan to step down as CEO. I've seen some names out there that he might actually call on to step into that CEO role. But as for my choice, take a look at who thinks he should be running Twitter. How about Snoop D-O-double-G, Snoop Dogg asked if he should run Twitter. And as you can see, the votes, he doesn't have as many as Elon. He's got only about 2 million, or a little less than 2 million right now. But it's overwhelmingly 81% of people say that he should take over as CEO. I think it'd be a pretty interesting little thing to see if Snoop Dogg were to take over. I mean, he can narrate videos for us and everything on Twitter. I mean, great opportunity. He needs to try to take over. That's all I have for this edition of Social Roundabout. But right now, we're going to take a quick break, and we will be back to wrap things up on FreightWaves Now.
The 2023 Freight Tech 25 list is filled with meaningful innovators from across the industry who are helping shape what the future of supply chain will look like. Check out the full list of these companies and all the latest Freight Tech news at FreightWaves.com.
Hold on a second, Tony. See that? No scrapes, no scuffs, no damage. Thank you. Because we make sure each pallet is touched as few times as possible and that is handled with care, no matter where it's going. That's the precision you get from a nationwide LTL freight company with over 35 years of industry-leading experience, an entire team that's driven to deliver on time and damage-free.
XPO, your freight, first.
We are back at FreightWaves Now, and I'm Sydney Edwards with a last look at our headlines for the day. Now, Union Pacific has been named on the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for North America, an annual metric that gauges companies' commitments to sustainability. The index represents the top 20% of the largest 600 American companies in the S&P based on certain criteria. UP, SSX, Canadian National, and Canadian Pacific were also named on the list. This was UP's first time appearing in the index thanks to a handful of sustainability initiatives put in place during 2021. Tesla could announce its first automotive assembly plant in Mexico soon. The automaker is reportedly acquiring land in Nuevo Leon, a Mexican state bordering Texas, and will produce the new Semi, its all-electric Class 8 truck, at the site. The facility will be about 140 miles from the border crossing in Laredo, Texas. Back in August, the Nuevo Leon government announced Tesla would have its own lane at the border crossing to facilitate trade for local automotive suppliers. Tesla debuted its long-awaited Semi earlier this month at the company's headquarters in Austin, Texas. And Walmart and drone delivery partner DroneUp announced a new group of markets that will bring drone delivery service to customers in Florida, Texas, and Arizona. The expansion will add 16 cities and 22 stores into the delivery network. To use the service, customers have to be within 1 mile of the participating store, but they can order from over 10,000 different items, including fragile and temperature-controlled goods. The companies are advertising deliveries in as little as 30 minutes. Now, for details on those headlines and even more happening, you can head out to FreightWaves.com and check out our FreightWaves app. For the full FreightWaves TV experience, however, head to tv.freightwaves.com. I'll hand this on over now to Kaylee Nix and Anthony Smith for the rest of our show.
All right, Donny, thank you for that. And we are done for your Monday edition of FreightWaves Now. It's a short week. We've got a short day. Know What the Truck is. Dooner is already celebrating the Christmas festivities.
Good for him. But we do have the stack out coming up. So we had Mike Baudendistel on a little bit earlier, and he had some amazing insights. And he's going to have tons more later on this afternoon.
We'll have Drop Zone this afternoon as well. So stay tuned for that. We will be back tomorrow and have almost a full week of FreightWaves Now. We are off on this Friday. But make sure that you are sticking with us for Thursday as we wrap up your 2022 with a special year in review of our show and some predictions for 2023. Have a great rest of your Monday. We'll see you guys tomorrow morning.
Hold on a second, Tony. See that? No scrapes, no scuffs,